Thank you very much. Let's get more on all of this with Congressman John Garamendi, a Democrat on the Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining us. I want to get right to this breaking news that we're receiving right now, this new statement coming in from Kim Jong-un, who I guess did not take kindly to the president's words at the United Nations earlier this week. Let me put the statement up on screen, parts of the statement up on screen, and then get your reaction. We can put this up on screen. It says, this is from Kim Jong-un. He is about President Trump. He is unfit to hold the prerogative of supreme command of a country, and he is surely a rogue and a gangster, fond of playing with fire rather than a politician. I will make the man holding the prerogative of the supreme command in the U.S. pay dearly for his speech, calling for totally destroying the DPRK. Whatever Trump might have expected, he will face results beyond his expectation. I guess, Congressman, what is your initial reaction to that statement? It is obviously very strong stuff.
Well, yes, very strong, and what the president said was equally strong. Total destruction seems to be mutually assured here unless we can get to the negotiating table. Therefore, the sanctions that were discussed by the president today, extremely important. This is a direct result of the law that Congress passed actually over the objections of the president last July. So now we get those sanctions in place, get China in place, and that seems to be coming along, Russia. You get all of these countries working together on the sanctions, and then you can, I think, force the negotiations to take place. Denuclearization, absolutely a piece of that. And keep in mind that we do have on the ground two countries that are still at war, North Korea and South Korea.
But yes. Congressman, I just to get back to that statement, I know you're a Democrat, yes, but Kim Jong-un referring to the President of the United States as a rogue and a gangster. Do you have a problem with that?
Of course I have a problem with that. And I suspect every American should have a problem with that. But what we have here is a lot of very heated rhetoric that doesn't help solve the problem on either side. And so I've said for a long, long time, tone it down. Teddy Roosevelt had it right. Carry a big stick, and nobody has a bigger stick than the United States, and speak softly. And by the way, you ought to tweet softly. And put the rhetoric down, move with these sanctions, move towards the negotiations. The six-power negotiations have not taken place for 6 years now. Get that underway. There are many things that we can accomplish in the negotiation process. And I believe it is possible to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula in a serious negotiations that would come after these sanctions begin to take hold. And they will. They're going to put an extraordinary amount of pressure on North Korea, and that's what we have to get to.
Congressman, you took a trip to South Korea this summer. How will this escalating war of words between President Trump and the Kim regime be received by the South Koreans? I mean, obviously, when the president refers to Kim Jong-un as Rocket Man, this is sort of a predictable response. Since you've been to that region, what is your sense of how the South Koreans are going to respond to this?
Well, the South Koreans, I'm sure, are mightily concerned that this rhetoric could cause someone, either any of the three parties involved here, to do something that could ignite a war. If a war were to take place on the peninsula, Seoul, South Korea would be seriously devastated. We're talking about thousands, if not tens of thousands of lives lost in the first week of that barrage of artillery and rockets. Similarly, American soldiers and families are at risk. At the same time, the president's quite correct about North Korea being devastated. A war on the peninsula would be a serious war in which tens of thousands, if not hundreds, would die within just a few weeks. We don't want to go there.
Yeah, and
we need to be strong. We need to be clear. But at the same time, we got to be very, very careful with the rhetoric that it could cause a mistake to be made.
And let me ask you more about that. Let me show another piece of Kim Jong-un's statement. It says his remarks, talking about the president here, have convinced me, rather than frightening or stopping me, that the path I chose is correct and that it is the one I have to follow to the last. And so what Kim Jong-un seems to be saying is that if you escalate, I'm going to escalate it, and this is just going to continue to go back and forth.
Well, unfortunately, the back and forth, as was just said there by Kim Jong-un, is I have to have nuclear weapons to stop the American onslaught. And that's one of the reasons it's been clear for the last several years that he perceives these nuclear weapons to be his ultimate guarantee of survivability. And you couple that with an intercontinental ballistic missile, and he believes that with these, America cannot and will not attack me. That's a very dangerous situation because we are at risk in that scenario if it plays out when he has these weapons and he has the means of delivery. So what we have to do is to put a stop to all this, put a freeze in place, get to the negotiating table, not suggesting that a freeze would preclude negotiations, but as part of it, and tone down the rhetoric.
And so when the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, said earlier today about that Rocket Man line, he said, well, it got everybody's attention.
Yes.
Kim Jong-un, when he makes these kinds of remarks that we're seeing this evening, obviously the president, and when he said Rocket Man, that, if you listen to H.R. McMaster, that was sort of by design in terms of getting everybody's attention. What is your understanding of the psychology of Kim Jong-un? Is he trying to get everybody's attention when he says these sorts of provocative things, or is he just so unstable that having provocations coming from Washington makes the situation that much more dangerous?
Well, I think in every contentious situation, whether it's a negotiation over a hotel contract or, in this case, situation between the United States and North Korea, it's imperative that our planners put themselves in his shoes. And what does that, what would we do if we were in that situation? And probably we would do exactly what Kim Jong-un is doing, try to develop a fail-safe protection. And that, in his situation, he perceives to be these nuclear weapons coupled with these intercontinental ballistic missiles. And so the tough rhetoric, the very bellicose rhetoric, gives him further incentive and motivation to develop his nuclear enterprise and his rockets. The problem here is we need to back away from that. And I really would hope that the president does not respond to this most latest words from North Korea.
You think he's going to tweet on it, Congressman? What are the chances that he's going to tweet on this evening?
About 98%. And if he does tweet, tweet softly. Tweet in such a way that you are encouraging negotiations. Build upon the words that have been said with regard, or actually the sanctions. Build upon those sanctions. You don't need to be bellicose. The facts are there. The banks are going to be restricted in dealing with North Korea. That's a very important and a very powerful sanction. So just tweet softly, say, hey, listen, we want to get to negotiations, which is what the president did say. Use that line of rhetoric or that line of tweets rather than a Rocket Man or any other kind of thing that you might use if you were a schoolyard bully.
All right, Congressman, stay with us. We're going to continue following Kim Jong-un's comments. We're also getting new information about the breaking news on Russia and a new agreement by Facebook to hand over evidence to Congress. We'll talk about that with the Congressman after a quick break.
We may find
We're back with Democratic Congressman John Garamendi following breaking news. North Korea's Kim Jong-un firing back at President Trump's bellicose rhetoric at the United Nations. He's promising that Mr. Trump will pay dearly for his threats, and he's calling him mentally deranged. Congressman, stand by. We're also getting breaking news in the Russia investigation. Tonight, Facebook has struck a new agreement with Congress to turn over evidence. Let's go to our CNN senior congressional correspondent, Manu Raju. Manu, this is a pretty startling development. Facebook is sharing information about thousands of Russian ads that were on the site. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's right. And Senator Mark Warner, the ranking member on the Senate Intelligence Committee, told me earlier this week that this information that Facebook has talked to Congress about really is just the, quote, tip of the iceberg in this investigation going forward. Now, for the first time, Facebook has actually agreed to provide roughly 3,000 ads that it found that was linked to Russian actors during the campaign, an effort that the Intelligence Committee believed was designed to help President Trump. Now, before Facebook over the summer said it had no evidence that there were any Russian actors who purchased campaign ads, but it found after an extensive review that indeed there was, and they actually provided some of that information earlier to Special Counsel Bob Mueller after Mueller's team obtained a warrant to get that information. Now, earlier today, Zuckerberg explained this decision to provide these 3,000 ads to members of Congress by saying this.
We've been investigating this for many months now, and for a while we had found no evidence of fake accounts linked to Russia running ads. And when we recently uncovered this activity, we provided that information to the special counsel. We also briefed Congress, and this morning I directed our team to provide the ads we've found to Congress as well. We will continue our own investigation into what happened on Facebook in this election. We may find more, and if we do, we will continue to work with the government on it. We're looking to foreign actors, including additional Russian groups and other former Soviet states, as well as organizations like the campaigns, to further our own understanding of how they used all of our tools.
Now, Jim, one change that Facebook is going to employ going forward is that it's actually going to require some disclosure from these ads that are occurring on Facebook. As we know, there aren't those restrictions that there are on television political ads in which it says who purchased and paid for those ads, but Facebook says it's going to implement some new measures as a result of this review. Now, in addition to that, Facebook also is going to face a number of questions going forward, and as well as who these ads were targeting, whether or not there were any Americans who were involved in directing some of those ads in some key states at key points in the election. And that's one reason why that the Senate Intelligence Committee tells me that they plan to move forward with a public hearing as soon as next month to bring in Facebook and other social media platforms. And Jim, Twitter too, also coming before the Senate Intelligence Committee staff next week. A lot of questions for them as well about whether any Russian actors were involved in purchasing ads and doing other activities on Twitter during the campaign season, Jim.
And we're already hearing from Democrats in the House who want to see hearings as well. Manu Raju, thank you very much. Let's go back to Congressman John Garamendi from California. He's on with us talking about all of this. And Congressman, what was your response when you saw the CEO of Facebook come forward and say that there were ads coming in from the Russians that were all over everybody's Facebook accounts during the last election cycle? I mean, nobody saw this coming.
Well, I suspect that may not have been the case. We've known for several months, and I think even during the campaigns, we knew that Russia was somehow engaged in the election. There's something far more important than the profitability of a company here. It's really about the American democracy and the ability to have an election that is fair and open. Frankly, there ought to be two very strong laws passed immediately. One is that all of these new advertising platforms, Facebook, all the rest, must disclose who is buying political ads. And a broad definition of what a political ad is. Secondly, we ought to make it absolutely clear with a very strong law that foreign governments cannot engage in American elections, period. If they do, there will be severe repercussions to their country and to the companies that operate from those countries. We have to protect our democracy. We have enough fights within the United States without adding to the clamor and conflict of an election, having outside countries playing in our election.
Do you want to see Russia punished for this? Should they be punished for this?
Well, they already are. There are sanctions that are on Russia, not only for what they did in the Ukraine, and there are sanctions with direct sanctions as a result of the election. Those were imposed by President Obama. There's been some talk that Trump would relax those. No, I don't think they're enough. As this unfolds and we find out more and more, and as we understand the way it may have influenced the election, we need to ramp up the sanctions for two reasons. One, Russia needs to know that it cannot invade countries. It cannot have little green men in these countries destabilizing Eastern Europe and other parts of the world. And secondly, you're not going to mess in our elections, Mr. Putin. And if you do, there are going to be severe repercussions, heavier sanctions coming your way.
All right, Congressman John Garamendi, some strong words there at the end. Thank you very much. Just ahead, the news just now breaking in North Korea, Kim Jong-un issuing a long statement blasting President Trump.